There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you by the generosity of our friends with the Haverty family, the Illig family, the Kearney Warnell Foundation, UMB Bank trustee, the Sherman family, the Cockrell family, Kansas City Orthopedic Institute, Don and Mary Doherty, and the Bergman family. Thank you.
Welcome once again to another episode of There's Just Something About Kansas City. I'm your host, Frank Bohl. Don't forget, like, listen, and subscribe, and you get There's Just Something About Kansas City anywhere that you get your podcast. Well, we're outdoors, as you can tell. We're on a bridge. We're on a Rock Island bridge, and this man beside me, Michael Zeller, this is his dream and his baby, and the story about this bridge and what you're going to do to it is just absolutely amazing. Mike, thank you for coming.
Yeah, well,
actually,
glad to have you here.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, you're out over the river.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, 60 feet up right now.
Yeah, 60 feet up. So talk a little bit about Chicken on the Bridge. Talk a little bit about the original idea when you're out on the river floating around with your family and friends.
Well, it didn't start out like this. It started out with a joke. As we came up the river, we were all puzzling at this structure, wondering, is that a car bridge or, just what were we looking at there? I was holding a potato gun. My oldest son and I had built a potato gun. And we realized, we got closer, we could tell it was a railroad bridge. And it looked, robust. It's a railroad bridge. And I said, man, somebody ought to do something with that thing. Maybe put a restaurant out there and call it Chicken on a Bridge. So it was just a throwaway line. It wasn't even really particularly funny, but inside of the throwaway line was an idea that an unused railroad bridge, something that's really beefy, never salted, they never salt railroad bridge, never a reason to, was kind of like land. And you could reinvent it and do fun things out there. Maybe you put a chicken restaurant or a children's museum or, who knows, but that it was worth using for something else.
Right.
That was the idea.
So that germinated the idea. Then tell me about the steps. How often did you rethink back and go, you know what? I think I'm going to put that idea. I'm going to put it together. I'm going to get some friends. Of course, you have you do have some friends on this deal. You have
a lot of friends.
Yeah, you do. You have Mike Ladden and John McGurk, and you also have Jake Fazy, a St. Louisian, but the other guys are all Kansas Cityans. And so what did you do? How did you approach people? And when did you get the solid idea and say, you know what? I'm going to put that idea to fruition?
I probably spent 7 or 8 years. I worked for Kansas City PBS, and I would talk to Sly James and Joe Reardon when they were having their bromance. When they'd come in, I'd say, "Guy, you guys got this bridge down there that connects your two cities. Why don't you find somebody to do something on that? Put Chicken on a Bridge out there." It was a fun joke, right? And Sly James calls me Chicken Boy to this day. And after about 6 years, I called into KCUR when they were talking about the West Bottoms. I couldn't get anybody to do it, so I decided to do it myself. And I brought John McGurk in as a partner. He had rolled out from being Sly's chief of staff, and at that time, Kansas City, Missouri owned the bridge, so we got the lease on it. It's since transferred to KCK. We're in Kansas. This is a long and winding path.
It's
Frank.
Okay.
It's crazy.
That's what we want to find
out. I
out.
probably would have never started it had I realized what a torturous path it would be. But now that we're at the end, I'm glad that I did. And I just wanted to, though, say, and then we brought in some expertise with Mike Ladden as another junior partner, as our finance person.
Yeah, because you had to buy the bridge.
Well, we rented it.
Right.
We didn't really want to own a bridge. We're just middle-class guys, right? With a crazy idea. We'd all done professional things in our lives, but none of us had ever done anything like this.
Yeah, so, and you're not an architectural engineer, you're nothing like that. You're actually an economic geography major from the University of Missouri, which I find interesting. And you taught geography at the University of Missouri, too.
Yeah, briefly.
So I think that's where the rivers thing comes in, because you know how important rivers were to the development of this country before there were airplanes, before there were railroads.
Yeah, they were the highways, and that's why Kansas City is here, the confluence of these two big rivers, the Kansas, or the Kaw, as the locals call it, and the Missouri, of course, just 2 miles north of us here at Strawberry Hill. Yeah,
that's it's so interesting, because people would look at a bridge and you don't even think about it. I'll drive from here back to my old hometown of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has 3 rivers. I never thought about the bridges in Pittsburgh, what ones were being used for cars, if there were railroad bridges, which I'm sure there were, and if there's some abandoned bridges there as well. So
We've got a long history of rivers and bridges, and they're central to the economy and the early culture of Kansas City, but yet we don't really recognize them. We drive over them.
yeah,
Most of us don't really know which river we're driving over, because they're like invisible geography underneath us as we just kind of catch them out of the corner of our eye while we're going to the airport. But we want this bridge to both activate the Kansas River. You know, energy follows attention. We'll have, I don't know, 500,000 people a year up here regarding the Kansas River, which is actually quite beautiful. You know,
right.
it's 140 yards across. And we'll also make this that place in Kansas City that celebrates imagery and drawings and historical blueprints of our big rivers and the bridges that cross it. The old Hannibal Bridge, which is famously the origin of Kansas City taking off and beating St. Joseph in the race to be the big city on this side of the state. The Paseo Bridge, a lot of bridges up and down the Kansas River. We're gonna have a lot of photography of those on the bridge as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too, because once it's up and going,
Yeah.
you got the Kansas City Chiefs here. Royals were in the playoffs last year. You're going to have those shots that you really want. I mean, they're so used to doing a Western Auto Building, World War I Museum, great places, of course. You know, Union Station, whatever. They'll have another shot to be able to put on those national broadcasts, which will bring more attention.
We sure hope so. I
Yeah.
mean, it's such a funny thing. It's a bridge with a lot of people dining and dancing, and we can have concerts out here, yoga in the morning. There's all this funny activity, boats on the water, and it's all over the river, you know.
Okay, so let's talk about what's going to be on the bridge itself, you know, before we talk about infrastructure on both sides and what you may want to see developed. This is going to be a walking bridge. You can also ride your bike to the beginning of the bridge, walk your bike across it, and then reconnect with the levee system and the whole thing on the other side of the bridge. But it's going to be, you can have a market in the mornings. You're going to be able to have weddings here. Talk a little bit about how you're going to enclose this and what you're going to do to it.
Well, this bridge is serving three purposes. It's a public crossing, as you said, with trailhead services. We'll have 16 bathrooms out here, drinking fountains, open public seating. We invite everybody to come on out. You don't have to buy anything. And it also connects the trails on both sides of the levee. On the east side of the river here, if you go north, it connects to the trail that takes a right down the Missouri River to the new CPKC soccer stadium.
That's perfect.
And then down the Paseo and then back over for the green line that's circling downtown Kansas City, Missouri, but also connecting this Kansas City, Kansas levee top trail across the Kansas River to the Kansas City, Kansas levee top trail. They need a better name. Going upriver all the way up to the Procter & Gamble plant about 6 miles away. And that's a beautiful ride, by the way. You look across that river at the steep hillsides and it's forested. It looks vaguely Central European. You get some amazing views of downtown. This river is, you know, it's our greatest natural resource. We'll never have a mountain or an ocean in Kansas City, but we've got these two big rivers. And Berkeley Park's doing a great thing of activating the Missouri River, and this will activate the Kansas River. And the Kansas River, the difference is it's not navigable. There's no commercial craft. I hear railroads. We got a lot of trains.
Yes,
two very active railroad bridges half a mile away, but no commercial boating because there's a weir, kind of a dam just upstream. So it's very peaceful. You could safely kayak, canoe with your kids on this river.
Yeah, right. And then talk about how you're going to enclose the top for your venue area.
Yeah, well, the bridge will be that whole western truss, which is 100 yards long. That's open public space. We've talked to farmers markets about being out there. You talked about craft fairs, craft beer festivals, all that kind of thing. And here on the central truss is an entertainment district. It's a stacked two-level, together they'll hold about 800 people upstairs and downstairs. And the top deck is both open air and enclosed event space. On a Wednesday afternoon, you can come up here, read a book, work on your laptop. But Friday night, you got to have a ticket because there's a concert going, or Saturday, there's a wedding. Downstairs is a restaurant that's open 10 months a year. We're going to shut the services down in January and February because it just gets too darn cold, but people will still be able to cross. There's a restaurant downstairs, a garden, a beer garden over a couple dozen feet west of it. Just a lot of things going on. And we're also going to program the bridge. We'll program the bridge and the river. For example, this fall, the Kansas City Boat Club, did you know we have crew rowing in Kansas City?
No, we did not.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, there's 2 clubs actually. One of them home base here right on the Kansas River downstream from us right there. They're going to have a regatta on the Kaw, the Kansas River. So we can have 1,500 people up here with the PA system and live color commentary rooting on the race from above. It's like that didn't happen anywhere.
No, that is just, yeah, that's incredible. And I think some of this idea came to you. I think you worked for BMW over in Germany, right?
Yeah, for a while.
Yeah, and the deal. And so you traveled Germany, and you'd go to cities and in Asia as well. You go to Taipei, you go to Prague, you went to Munich, and you see infrastructure reuse projects. And I guess you brought that idea back. Why can't we do this?
Well, we are.
In Kansas City, yeah.
We're doing this right here, and there's some other examples, but we're newer.
Yeah.
You know, and we're just kind of getting comfortable with having old stuff. Seems like when stuff first started getting old, we just immediately tore it down in the 60s and 70s,
Right.
but that period seems to have passed, and we're valuing old things and reinventing them, because reinvented stuff it forces creativity.
Yeah.
And they're often more fun. Reinvented things are.
Yeah, right. And you still have a lot of the patina, which
yeah.
is great. You know, you
Yeah.
still have the rust on the steel.
We're leaving it.
Yeah, right. And an interesting thing for me is all the steel for this bridge. This bridge was originally here it was here in 1901, right? I'm sorry. It was originally swept away in 1901 with a flood. Had to be rebuilt. It reopened in 1905. It has a lot of interesting things to it. I know you raised it so that it'll stay out of any kind of flood water from now on, right? And that was a real project in its own right.
Yeah, the purpose of this bridge was to connect the Kansas City stockyards
Right.
that were massive and on both sides of the river. Stockyards and 4 big processing plants over there. So they would shuttle cattle in rail cars back and forth across this. Built of Carnegie steel. From Pittsburgh.
Ambridge Steel in Pittsburgh, down in Ambridge, Pennsylvania. It was the scene
Your hometown.
for that. Yeah, Pittsburgh's my old hometown. Like I said, there's 445 bridges there. I'm sure they can repurpose a few
In
of
one
those.
town, 445.
Yes.
Oh my
inside
God.
Inside Allegheny County, inside the city limits of Pittsburgh, which is crazy. Nobody realizes that. I didn't even realize that until I was doing research for this. I was wondering, geez, I wonder how many bridges there are in Pittsburgh. I looked up and said, oh my God, that's a
impressive.
lot of bridges. Yeah, but
we had a lot.
Yeah, right. That All the Right Moves was filmed in Ambridge, Pennsylvania, and the high school was called Am Pipe because they supposedly at the steel mill made pipe instead of calling it Ambridge High School, and they filmed all that stuff there. So when you said you're using the rails for the bar steps, the steps on the bar, you're using the original rails.
Yeah, steel rail.
yeah.
They'll float on these little toadstools at the base of the bar down here. The bridge members themselves, I can show you later, are stamped. It says Carnegie.
Oh wow!
Carnegie
yeah, right,
Steel,
Carnegie
built by
Steel.
the American Bridge Company.
American Bridge.
And you rightly said that the original bridge, which sat about 20 feet lower than we are right now, was swept away in a flood. And then about 3 years later, this new bridge opened up, which is kind of a standard model across the country. You'll see this in a lot of places. And there's 3 trusses. There's the 2 originals that are camelback trusses, I've learned. They're each 100 yards long. And then the Corps widened the channel during World War I, and they tacked on a 3rd truss, which is unlike the original 2. So it's a grand total of about 700 feet. So if you stood the thing up, it's taller than the arch is in St. Louis, 700 feet. It'll hold 1,900 people. It transported 7 million live pounds of freight train.
Gosh.
It's a beast.
Absolutely amazing what this did. 51, another flood. That's when they got the screw lift gates to get this up higher than the levees, right? And that was an engineering marvel at the time, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was marble, but it was
worked.
done quickly. What's interesting about that, Frank, is the Corps went to a local Kansas City, Kansas company called LG Barkus, family-owned company, and they came out and installed these gates that could slowly lift the trusses one at a time in advance of a flood. We're not in a flash flood zone here. It's a lowland river. They know when the water's raising. We think it might have been used once, but they fell into disrepair by the 60s, if not earlier, and they just sat here for another 70 years or so. And then that same company, they're our builder, LG Barkas, great family-owned company, 3 generations later now, over in KCK. That's the name on these borrowed
right.
vests
I think
that
it's
we
on the
have.
back, yeah.
They came back out. They took off all the old rotten ties and laid the steel down and worked with the companies that poured the concrete. They're our general contractor on this. But they also used the same lift gates, totally unmaintained for 70 years. They came out here, oiled them up for about 2 or 3 months, rocked them back and forth, applied new force. The electric motors had fallen into disrepair.
No, sure.
But otherwise, all the gears, like a Swiss watch, worked just fine, and slowly raised these trusses another 4 feet after 70 years of just disregard.
Disuse, yes, absolutely, yeah.
So the bottom of the bridge is again higher than the levee.
Yeah.
Because the Corps just now finished raising the levees on the Kansas River. So this bridge can't be swept away again because the whole valley'd have to flood before it gets to the bottom of the bridge.
Right. So talk to me about getting the bridge. Okay, like for you to take over and be able to do all this, what was that process like? When did you start that process?
I kind of did it on the side while I was doing a couple of other projects. Started to investigate who owned the bridge, and I realized, weirdly, Kansas City, Missouri owned a railroad bridge in Kansas that they had acquired kind of as, we used to joke, the vestigial tail when Casey Moe. So I saw the stones at Kemper Arena in '81. There was no place to park because
Right.
the tracks that came off of this bridge went over and wrapped tightly around Kemper Arena like a snake. And it just cut the arena off from any parking. The city was cleaning that up in the early '80s because this railroad had gone into receivership.
Right.
You know, it was the Rock Island Railroad that built it. It went through 3 or 4 hands along the way, and it was the St. Louis Railroad. They're going out of business. City bought that land, and the railroad, I think, said, "How would you like a bridge too?" Right? So they ended up with the bridge, and they were going to put parking over there and use it as a pedestrian connector.
Right.
That never happened. They built the multi-story car park instead.
Yeah, right.
So this just sat benignly neglected for another 40, 50 years until we happened to notice it.
So you notice it, and who'd you go to first and approach
Well,
them
I
on,
started knocking
would you
at
like to give me this bridge?
I started knocking. I didn't really want to own it, but because, you know, if things go wrong, I'm just a middle-class guy that worked for PBS, right?
Yeah.
With a big idea. And so I thought renting it for a long period of time would be better, long enough to capitalize the project so my investors could get their money back. And I knocked at many doors at Casey Moe and the staff. They couldn't really get their head around it because it'd been 45, 50 years, you know, everybody turned over. And
Right.
they had to dig pretty deep into the archives to realize they owned a railroad bridge in Kansas. And then I was having some problems. That's when I went and found John McGurk,
Yeah.
who had been Sly's chief of staff.
Right.
He'd rolled out and he was in private practice. It's all above the board, but he knew everybody and how things worked. And he brought Troy Schulte down, and we sat on the riverbank over there. And I will say there was some PBR tall boys involved.
Really?
Yeah,
I would
there
never
was.
imagine.
There was. And right on cue, some teenage girls came out on the bridge and started photographing each other. It was like a setup, but it wasn't. And McGurk said, "Troy, you got liability now."
Yeah.
And he laughed and, you know, claimed we were setting him up. And he said, "What do you need?" He said, "We just want to lease this thing and make a positive out of a negative." Because
Yeah,
it was
sure.
the definition of blight.
Right.
It was hazardous blight. You know, a lot of kids playing on it. I don't know how many people talk about coming out here as kids. Just today,
Right.
up the street at the Guadalupe Center, some of the fellows were telling me how they came down here as teenagers and did a lot of drinking and carousing.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So we're taking blight and we're turning into something positive.
Yeah, right. So, and to get the two states to cooperate on stuff is not exactly the easiest thing.
It was on this.
Oh, really?
I think the
Oh, that's-
symbolism, it's a
that's great.
bridge.
Yeah.
There's nobody living right around here. It captures people's imagination to reuse something and preserve history.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a hard project because it's so unusual, and we're not like, you know, we're not a big development company that already had money behind us. But despite all of that, the reason we were able to pull it off was that it's an easy project to be a part of. And
Yeah.
we've had a very open arm approach because we need a lot of help.
Yeah, and I guess there's a $1 lease. Is that right for
Well, it's
the
a little,
first 33 years, and then it's
Yeah.
to be renewed for 33 more? So
we had a 50-year lease with Casey Moe.
Okay.
And the price was every 2 years they had to get it inspected for about $9,000.
Okay.
And so ours was like $4,500 a year. And then when we started, Kansas City, Kansas came to us and said, hey, this bridge is in Kansas, and we'd like to use it to connect our trails. You want to do a public partnership with us? Public-private partnership? We said, sure. Because we needed help.
Yeah, sure.
And there's no reason it couldn't serve several purposes at once. And then they wanted to transfer, so Casey Moe transferred it to Casey Moe to KCK for $1.
$1, okay,
And now
that's where that lease comes from.
they lease it to us for a nominal fee, like $775 a month.
Oh, wow.
That's our reward for spending 7 years of our life, transforming blight into something that hopefully is going to be one of the things that people think of when you say Kansas City.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about both sides of the river. Let's talk about the Kansas side first, which is on my right over here. What kind of infrastructure and development are you looking for on that side of the river?
So in our development agreement, the city of Kansas City, Kansas, the unified government, is building a ramp down so people in wheelchairs, a gentle ramp, can get off the bridge and then connect to the trails on that side, and also a staircase and a small parking lot.
Right.
And the city on the
Missouri
east side,
yeah,
it's not really the Missouri side, because this river is not the border. The border is roughly
that's right.
American Royal Drive.
Right,
Just
exactly.
inside. Technically, it's a bi-state project because the land goes into Kansas City, Missouri, but the bridge is all in Kansas City, Kansas. So the city of Kansas City, Missouri gave it the project a boost by slowing down American Royal Drive, making it 2 lanes, and providing some parallel parking, because we're going to have a lot of families walking back and forth to the arena.
Yeah.
And cars and trucks famously do about 50 down through here. So they really wanted to slow that down. Yeah. But KCK, the unified government, they brought in a lot of earth, about 20,000 yards. And they built up that side. They're kind of built a plateau behind the levee. And there's some nice renderings that maybe I can get you images of. Their renderings of like a park up there with picnic tables and trees overlooking the river, and the docks that eventually will be on the Kansas River here too.
Right.
From long walking trails down.
Right, and you're talking about a couple river boats, like sort of like barge type. Don't think casino here, right? Okay, we're not talking about, and we're not talking about Ozark. Okay,
no Bible salesman.
The Netflix, okay. No Bible salesman. But we're talking about they could be their own separate bars, not really even attached here, but close enough that people could go there.
Yeah, one of them will serve as a coffee shop and bar, and a kind of a private club for entrepreneurs, and then the other one's going to rent kayaks, canoes, and electric Chris-Craft boats. This is not us. These are other entrepreneurs who bought these 2 things, and they're on cradles upstream. They're going to bring them down and pin them over there. It's the Zip KC guys that own the zip lines in Bonner Springs.
Right. Okay. Oh, and so how many other private investors came to you and said, "Hey, can I get down there and take a look? And I would like to put this here or put that there." What else is on the horizon here for this?
No others have come to us.
Okay.
But this area is becoming a district. The new Kansas City signage calls it the waterfront, the Kansas waterfront. We have a lot of riverfronts, but what makes this unique is you can interact with the water here. You can kayak and canoe and row on this thing.
Right.
Serendipitously, there's other stuff happening. The Flaherty Collins, apartment developer, just opened another 250 units behind us that overlook the river, and they are talking with the city about putting another 400 units in. Eventually, this development might travel north all the way to the confluence on both sides of the river, and we could have a very beautiful recreational waterway in the heart of the metro.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago. My wife and I were in Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's right on the Ohio River. They have this thing called the Purple Bridge, and it is sort of the same thing. Now, they don't have a second level, and I think you'd have to have pretty good weather in order to have a wedding out there, to plan a wedding a long period of time ahead of time, because you just don't know what the weather's going to do, and there was nothing close. But you can walk across. That connects Ohio to Kentucky, And all their stadiums are along the one side of the river, and that's on the Ohio side. Then on the Kentucky side, they have all these bars and restaurants that line it, and you can make a big loop across the Purple Bridge. There's another bridge to walk across the whole thing and come down. So it is
fun.
really interesting. Yeah.
And that's a big river too, the Ohio.
Oh
right?
yeah, that's a long stretch across there, but it was an old, unused railroad bridge.
Yeah.
So the same thing. Yeah.
Now we're enclosing this, so you can be out here in a
That's what I'm
rainstorm.
talking about. Yeah.
You can be out here in December and be comfortable. We got a lot of gas heaters, and we can bring the screens down. We can stop the air movement. It just gets too cold in January and February, so we're going to shut down the enterprises for then. Take a nice trip to Mexico. Come back for March.
You know what? That sounds pretty doggone good right there, brother.
That's not a bad
I'll tell you that. Yeah.
I'm looking
And
forward to that.
what were the biggest hurdles to overcome for you
Well,
to get this done, to get started and get this going?
probably establishing credibility. We had a lot of new right here. I mean, you got non-developers.
Right.
John's in the development business now, but he wasn't. Who are proposing an idea that had never been done. So it would have been easier if we were a big development company proposing that. So that was hard, and we had to figure it out too. The business model and the public service model and the engineering and the amount of money we could make to pay people back all had to work together. It had to work for the citizens of Kansas City, Kansas,
Sure.
for our investors, for patrons in the future, for the public at large. And we kept moving pieces around, trying to understand how you could do that on a railroad bridge. Originally, it was one level. There was a event space on that truss over there, that piece of the bridge, and one over here, and they both had their own little weird little ceiling roofs on it that the water would come through because the bridge came through the roof.
Right.
So we got around that by stacking them and then putting the envelope on, draping it on the outside of the bridge. So there's very few places where the bridge structure penetrates the envelope of this, and then the top deck provides a ceiling, a roof for the lower deck. So we kind of figured something out there that we think will be likely replicated in other places. That'll be a high honor, and we're working with. We had to raise a lot of money too.
Oh, I'm sure you did. Yeah, absolutely.
So this thing's like a barn raising. Initially, Kansas City, Kansas raised their hand to put $2 million. They own the bridge, and they get that back through CID taxes on the bridge. So they get their money back. They still own the bridge. Then the state got involved as economic development to try to activate the Kansas River.
Right.
State's namesake river. You know, they want to do something with it. And then we sold equity in our startup company to about 60 Kansas City proud investors.
Oh, wow.
Who saw
That's
that
terrific.
this was something important for our city, and that they could also get their money back and make a reasonable margin over time. It's a real estate play,
Absolutely,
frankly. We have a tenant who runs food and beverage, so we're kind of my LLC with my partners and our investors. We're in the position of kind of like we own the shopping mall, so to speak.
Sure.
And we're going to program it with a lot of activities.
Yeah, right. What about naysayers? Did you get much kickback on this?
You know, not publicly, really. I think a lot of people just thought that'll never happen, which would have been a reasonable assessment.
And who is this guy?
Like, who the hell
What's
are
going
these
on?
guys?
Yeah, who are these guys?
I never really faulted people for doubting that we could pull it off, but we hung with it. It's fundamentally a good idea, and one of our naysayers, I will, without naming him, say came out here, understood the project better, and said, "You're right. It's going to work. It's going to be great."
Wow.
And he became one of our white knights to help us get the project over the finish line.
Yeah, you always like the skeptics.
Yeah,
Seriously,
yeah,
you do.
yeah.
Because then you bring them out here and show them Junior going, you know what?
Uh-huh.
I'm not skeptical anymore. So I think that,
And he was a good one to win over.
Yeah. Do you have any, I know you've got a lot on your plate. Do you have any other reuse things that you see in Kansas City, and you go driving by something and all of a sudden you go, nobody's been using that thing for a few years. I wonder what they want to do with that.
My oldest son is wanting to get into the culvert business.
Culverts?
That's a joke. A culvert, you know, underground.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Not as sexy as bridges.
No, not really, yeah.
One of our investors is a fellow named Dave Brain, and he founded Entertainment Properties REIT. He came in early. he was actually a big help. He helped validate this idea.
Yeah, right.
And because he guided a lot of monies, they took that company public, and he has a lot of credibility. And one of our plans is, this is a proof of concept, to take it to other bridges, not only here perhaps in Kansas City, but around the country.
Yeah, right.
We found 25 of them so far that kind of meet our basic criteria about robustness and nearby population and access, that are just frankly just sitting there deteriorating.
Rusting.
They could turn into something positive that are placemaking, drive a lot of economic activity. We're a member of the Highline Network, which was pretty...
That's a big deal.
It was a big
That's
deal.
a big deal.
As my English wife would say, we were chuffed that they selected us, and we were frankly surprised. But they're really intrigued by this public-private philanthropic model that we cobbled together to get this thing done. The Sunderlands, the Hellsbergs, and some others have been a big help on this, because they can donate money too. This is public. A lot of the bridge is public infrastructure.
Yes.
They help pull that off, but the Highline was intrigued by that model, and then also combining private enterprise with some public space.
Yeah, and so the New York City has their Highline.
Yeah.
That's the parks and all that infrastructure that's on top. They're the old subway, but they're the elevated they call it.
It was actually a freight
bridges,
line that came into the city. Yeah.
Exactly. Not
and it
where
was
the
abandoned.
subways run, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it's a classic North American example of reuse. And it's driven tens of billions of dollars of real estate investment. The Hudson Yards are attributed to the Highline.
Right. This is not on this subject, but is the 670 cover part of the Highline is that a Highline project?
It is not.
That is not. Okay, so they're their own deal then. The one that's going to cover 670 down by the P&L.
The new park, that's a fabulous thing. As far as I know, they're not a Highline member.
They're not a Highline member.
Maybe they should be in the future, though. It'll be a great asset for the city.
Can you talk about Highline a little bit and who they are?
Well, the Highline was originally, it's a park created on a 6-mile elevated track that snakes into lower Manhattan. You ought to Google it if you haven't seen it. A lot of plants on it. It's double wide. It's not over a river, it's over land, but it snakes through Manhattan, so it's fabulous views. But it was so successful that they realized there's a lot of us doing that kind of stuff across North America, Canada, and Mexico. But it's a heavy lift. It's hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so they formed this kind of working think tank, a support network. We have a few conferences a year. Actually, the director, Alan Van Capel, was here giving a speech about a year ago now to about 300 people on this bridge. And at that time, he said this is, maybe a little hyperbole, the most important infrastructure reuse project in North America right now, because it has so much replication potential. So many unused railroad bridges out there, pulling down areas as blight. It could be used to both connect up their trails, but also be put into service as a children's museum or a bookstore. Or this is one model. It's certainly not the only model.
And Michael, thanks for your time, Ted. I know how busy you are. You got some drone people coming in here today to shoot some stuff to see how it'll work and how it'll look. Just talk about Kansas City, and I know you're a Kansas City native. Probably could have moved virtually anywhere you wanted to. You were in Europe for a while. You were working with you worked with the Rabbit Hole people. You also worked with PBS here, but why Kansas City? Why'd you stay, and what do you think about this town, and what keeps you here?
Well, there's just something about Kansas City, and
oh, that's good. That's really good. I like that.
No, there really is. There really is. My wife and I, we have 3 sons, and our oldest boy, he spent some time living in London, and he's back, and he's having a good time. He's living down the crossroads. He's got a lot of friends, and he still might head down to Austin or someplace, and I wish him the best. But he does say, this is a really fun town. It's a big city, and there's a lot hopping, and there's surprises still in Kansas City, but there's still enough open fabric to reinvent. You can go buy a building someplace, maybe in a disused neighborhood, and reinvent it. I got a hold of a bridge. A guy like me could have never done this in Philadelphia or New York or Los Angeles. It just couldn't have happened. And I got so much help from the city, from Lathrop, did all of our legal work pro bono on this because they want this to happen in Kansas City. There's a very collaborative spirit, and we brought a lot of people to town who've been looking at this, and we'll poll in folks, and they always say the same thing, how remarkably friendly and collaborative and open Kansas Cityans are to helping each other out. There's not a zero-sum game mentality. It feels kind of like we're all in this thing together.
Yeah, right. And we all like each other.
More or less,
You know?
yeah.
And that's
There's
amazing.
that assumption that you're going to like each other instead of you're going to hate each other.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, you bet.
Sometimes it works out otherwise.
You bet. Michael Zeller, Rock Island Bridge, or going to be better known as the R.I.B, the R.I.B. I just think it's an incredible project, and we're going to have you on again. Going to get this place opened up. We'll come back. We'll sit in the same spot. We'll talk to a couple of your partners and, maybe your food vendor and everybody else that's involved in this. It's an absolutely terrific project. I know we've had to dodge dates a few times, but I'm certainly glad we got a chance to
me
sit
too,
down and
Frank.
talk
And I
about
love what
this.
you're doing, capturing and celebrating all these great stories.
Michael,
thanks
so
for including
much.
me.
Michael Zeller, he's the founder, CEO of Flying Truss, and he's got himself a bridge, man. Rock
Chicken
Island
on a bridge.
Chicken on a bridge, my
ONA.
friend.
There's Just Something About Kansas City is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of documenting the stories that have built our city to inspire and educate generations to come. Our work is being made possible by the generous support of local partners like you. You can help us share these stories by becoming a sponsor today. Visit somethingaboutKC.org to learn more.